Niacin is vitamin B3. We started adding niacin to grains in 1941 during World War II to prevent pellagra, which is a devastating deficiency disease that caused the 4 Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and death. Pellagra was widespread in the early 1900s, especially in the South, but after enrichment, it rapidly declined and was effectively eliminated as a public health epidemic in the United States. Thiamine mono caused by severe thiamine deficiency, and after enrichment, beriberi essentially disappeared in the United States, which is why most of us have never even heard of it. Ferric phosphate is iron. We started adding iron to enriched grains in the 1940s because iron deficiency anemia was widespread across the population, especially among women and children. But after enrichment, iron deficiency anemia dropped significantly across the United States, and today it's actually far less common than it once was.
So food enrichment is essentially what this is about, and clearly the B vitamins, as we call them under other names like riboflavin, folates, they were being added to foods like rice, for example, as a supplementary way to add nutrients, because for a while there we had it more of, as an industrial nation, growing so quickly and having these cities develop too quickly for good wholesome food coming from farms. There was a scarcity of these micronutrients, and they had to be supplemented into, added nutrients to these foods. And still globally that happens in areas where they just don't have access to farms nearby and getting nutrients. So there is still a place for it in the world globally. But since then, we now have become, instead of a nutrient deficient in many ways, we've become a caloric excess. And although we can discuss this idea of where the thiamine comes from and where the folates come from, as us making these choices, we want to choose much more bioavailable source. The folacins, the methyl tetrahydrofolates, thiamine mononitrates, pyridoxine 5-phosphates, riboflavin 5-phosphate. So you can look at the label and check those out. We don't always have to fortify our food. If you get organically grown rice from a great source, it's going to have its nutrients built in, and you're not going to have to fortify them. And this is true for many packaged foods. We have different varying degrees of what we call processing. There's processed, there's mildly processed, there's ultra processed foods. And we want to start understanding the differences between these, because the more ultra processed it is, the more we have to fortify it back. Let's move away from that and get back to whole foods. And there's a time and a place for some of these things, but certainly we want to start choosing these kinds of foods that are not ultra processed. So the argument still exists where in some areas of the world we have to fortify, in others, like here in the States or in Europe, it's not necessary. We can get our hands on really quality rice that doesn't have to be fortified, and you get those other nutrients from either your microbiome and or through food and supplementation.